अत्र समागतेभ्यः सर्वेभ्यः संस्कृत्यभिमानिभ्यः मदीयान् नमोवाकान् निवेद्य इतः परम् अहम् आङ्ग्लभाषया एव So the topic that has been given to me is the relevance of Hindu knowledge system and its present relevance. Okay. Now, when we talk about Hindu knowledge systems, one can think of several things, and there is a short verse which presents the basic important text that we have. Starting with Angani Vedas Chatvaraha Mimamsa Nyaya Vistaraha Karma Shastram Puranam Vidya Syeta Chaturdasha. Then we have Ayurvedo Dhanurvedaha Gandharvaschaitendriyaha Artha Shastram Chaturpancha Vidya Yashtadashaiva Taha. Now, if you look at Angani, that itself has something which is very, very significant. The Angani basically means parts. Here it refers to what are called Vedangas. Shiksha, Vyakaranam, Kalpaha, Niruktam, Chandaha, Jyotisham. So these are called Vedas, Angas. Each one of them is a huge branch of knowledge in itself. Then of course we have Purana, which are 18 in number, Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, and so on. So the relevance of each of them, of course, cannot be highlighted. What I am going to do is to highlight a few things which are not generally known. Of course, the relevance of Vedanta may be highlighted by Swamini, and there are so many people who have been doing that in the present day context. So when we think of sciences, we can think of astronomical, chemical, mathematical, agricultural, psychological, medicinal. All of them have been so dealt with in great detail in many of our shastras. Each one is called a shastra. If we call Super Shastra, Hasta Shastra, Ashwa Shastra, and so on and so forth, the word shastra is basically a systematic study of that particular discipline. Then there are so many other technologies which we have been specializing. Next, please. I am going to highlight a few things related to astronomy, mathematics, and a few other things towards the end. So the first thing that we need to understand is we have a very beautiful calendrical system which is called Panchanga. The calendrical system that is being currently followed all across the world is Gregorian calendrical system, which has been imposed by these people who went and occupied in various other places. So the calendrical system that we have in India is something which is closely related to what is happening around us, and they are based on the systematic study of these celestial objects which are moving. The Gregorian calendrical system, on the other hand, has absolutely no connection with what is happening around. So this is one thing which we need to know, and this is something which we need to highlight as well. Next, please. So this is something which is a very simple experiment, but something which is extraordinarily important. We have a very simple technique by which we will be able to determine the direction at a given location. Nowadays what most people do is we just take a mobile and there will be an app, so that will give you some direction. But that direction has nothing to do with the east-west direction. It has to do with something which the earth has a magnetic field. So the magnetic north-south is something which is very different from the exact north-south which we want. So the magnetic north-south is something which is continuously changing all through. Earlier it was close to Canada, now it is moving towards Russia, and the rate at which it keeps moving is something like 55 to 60 kilometers per annum. So the magnetic north pole keeps swinging. But what we need is actually where the sun rises, sun sets, and the direction which is 90 degrees away from there, it is what is called the North Pole. How do we get it from this? So we have a text which is called Shulva Sutra, which is a part of Kalpa Sutra, which is a Vedanga, and this text gives a very interesting experiment which can be conducted. And this is a foolproof experiment, let me tell you. You can take it from me, grant it from me. So all that it says is you have to just erect and then ensure a certain flat plane. And then this can be performed on any given day at any given location in the earth. And the shadow, wherever it intersects with the circle, so you mark those points and that will give you the east-west direction. So there is a very, very minute correction which has to be done for this, and that has also been taken care in certain astronomical texts which have been composed at a later date. So the reason I am saying is this is something which is a very, very interesting experiment which can be performed by school children in order to understand and appreciate what exactly it is and how to be determined. So this teaches you a lot of things. Next please. Why is it changing? It is changing because so the sun keeps, and that is what is called Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. Ayana basically means motion towards the north. North of what? So north wherever the earth's axis keeps pointing. And we have a notion what is called Dhruva Nakshatra also, and that has to do with so the axis where this goes and meets, and there may be a star which is visible, there may not be a star which is visible, and this Dhruva is something which has been referred to in some of these Vedic literature which we recently discovered. So this motion of Dhruva has been studied. See, there is no Dhruva Tara and there was no Dhruva Tara for thousands of years. But a practice which started some 2500 years, 3000 years ago, so we kept on doing that, and there is a discussion in some of these texts and some of these Samhitas, if you look into, there is a discussion, there is a worry. So what is happening? Why is this changing? So on and so forth. So that is the reason why we need to have a certain experiment which is foolproof. In fact, let me just tell you an interesting anecdote. We also have this something called Vastu Shastra, and there are some people who actually find that the orientation has not been alright and so on and so forth. It may be. But then, so there was a friend of mine who had some problems and therefore he consulted some person and then he said that there is a problem in the orientation of the house. So then he recommended that this has to be knocked off and it has to be changed. So this friend of mine, there is another friend of mine who knows all this. So he told that this is what had been advised. So what do you suggest? So he said, let us first test ourselves and then let us decide. So there was a temple nearby, and the temple, so they had a certain way. Since it was very close, they made this measurement and found that the house was perfectly alright. The reason I am saying is, these temples which have been constructed based on this method. Whereas the person who recommended brought a certain device, and then that device can deflect with your card also in your pocket, right? So any magnetic field can affect that, and there are so many sources by which it can be affected. So this is a very interesting small technique which we need to know. Please proceed. Another interesting experiment which can be performed by school children is this one. So you have this device. This device is a very, very simple device, but it is a very profound device with which you can do several experiments. All of them have been discussed in Indian astronomical works, and this device basically tells you that you will be able to determine the local sidereal time. So what we have is a general, see in Bay Area you have a certain time, in Boston area you have a different time. But local sidereal time is what we need to know. So the other time you have to adjust, otherwise you may have to do that, see daylight saving, etc. So all that has to be done. Now this gives you the local sidereal time, and the formula is this. All of them have been quoted in the form of Sanskrit verses. So you basically have sine and cosine function in this, and what goes in here is phi is the latitude and delta is the declination. Z is the zenith distance of the sun at any given time. From this triangle OXY, you will be able to determine the zenith distance, and once you plug in, you will be able to get the local sidereal time. Next, please. Okay. These are set of vakyas. There is something called Vakya Panchangam. So people who are familiar from Tamil, in the Tamil area, South India, they know of this Vakya Panchangam. Vakya essentially means a sentence. So a sentence basically gives you certain numbers. What are these numbers? These numbers are essentially the longitudes of various celestial objects which are of interest to you. So you look at this Gear na Shreyaha, Thena Shri, those who have performed Avanya Vittam. So with the proper Pandit, so he will render a few sentences of this. Gear na Shreyaha, Thena Shri, Putrasya Ramya, Prabhu Yajya, Kanya Nari, Raghavan Putraha. So all of them are sentences which are meaningful by themselves, but when you try to decode them, you get certain numbers. What are those numbers? 12 degrees 3 minutes, 24 degrees 09, and so on and so forth. If a person commits these sentences to memory, so then he will be able to construct his own Panchanga. So that is the point. So why have they done this? They wanted to do this in order to bring down the knowledge to common man. So memorizing a few sentences is very easy when you are young. So yesterday this Swamini was saying, so we memorize various poems in English which are meaningless. So anyway, the point is we have a fantastic power to memorize so many things when we are young, from 4 to 14. Anything that you just give them, it just gets into and stays with you forever. So that is what was done in the Indian tradition. You make them memorize Panini Sutra, you make them memorize Pingala Sutra, you make them memorize these Vakyas, and the mind is so rich together and it will retain it forever, and later it can be processed at a later stage. So now these Vakyas used to be memorized by people, and they basically give you the longitudes of the moon on successive days. So there is a process, there is a lot of mathematics which goes in. We are still able to not find what exactly has been done by these people with respect to planetary positions. So we have understood very clearly how the Vakyas have been constructed with respect to sun and moon, and then basically the sun and moon are timekeeping systems, and their differences basically gives you the Tithi, Nakshatra, and so on and so forth. Okay, so these Vakyas have been refined at a later stage. You see, the system has not been stagnant. So these first Vakyas you find here in Shreya, so they are also sentences which are meaningful and they convey you some worldly wisdom, right? So moral values. So here in Shreya, basically that means, so knowledge is something which is so important for us. So please proceed. Next please. So the importance of mathematics has been so beautifully conveyed by a set of verses, and there cannot be a better enticing way for a person to get into mathematics. If you want to do astronomy, you have to do mathematics, and if you want to learn mathematics, so you have to have a certain mechanism by which you will be able to generate fun in learning mathematics, which seems to be a very serious problem. So he says, whatever be the area in which you want to work, Laukika, Vaidika, and so on and so forth, then finally he says, Vahugar Vipralapaihim Trailokye Sacharachare Yatkinchit Vastu Tatsarvam Ganitena Vina Nahi. See, in fact, he includes Kama Shastra, Artha Tantra, you see, Chandaha, Alankara, Kavya, Tarka, Vyakarana, all of them have been included. In fact, there is nothing. So today, I mean, there will be various seminars where they will say math is all. Of course, 3D printing is mathematics, selection analysis is mathematics, all of them is mathematics. So that has been so beautifully conveyed by this man right at the beginning of the work in order to motivate, and this was the 9th century. Next please. You look at this verse basically gives you all the three important formulae related to circle and sphere. So you have pi r square formula first, you have then by 4 pi r square, you have 4 by 3 pi r cube, all of them have been stated, so I am not going to explain the verse, but this is what it is. Next please. You will never forget if you memorize this verse. Next. And there are various other interesting things which students have to do. So when I went to Seattle, so people asked me to address the school district, etc. And I asked them some books to have a look at how it is being taught. So I found a volume which is 630 pages, which is called Algebra 1. Another volume 120 pages, which is called Geometry. And a third volume, Algebra 2, 820 pages. So I mean, what is being done, I don't know, understand. So the entire geometry, algebra and arithmetic has been presented in 10 pages in Indian text. No, the problem is, I'll tell you, the problem is, you don't let students to think. If you just spoon feed, even to browse through 800 pages, it takes enormous amount of time. So here you teach the principles and then you make them think. So that is what has been done here, and that is what the Sutra method is all about. So you not only make them understand how it can be presented in such a succinct manner, and you make them memorize once and for all, which they will be able to apply and pull out whenever it is required. In the other process, if you just develop analytical faculty, this faculty is completely lost. So we are blessed with both the faculty and we need to develop both of them. Next please. So the magic squares which we find here is something which is important, and this will enhance the ability to do arithmetic calculations in a very fast way. So there are beautiful magic squares which have been discussed in Indian astronomical works. The relevance is what I am trying to say, that all of them are extremely relevant. Next please. And this is one thing which is very important. So you just look at, this is again a Shulva Sutra text message, to find out the value of root n. All of us know that surds cannot be calculated and it will be some infinite thing, that is what is called irrational number. Now there can be a rational approximation to that, but here you see a certain technique which has been discussed 2500 years before in a Shulva Sutra text, where he says you just construct a certain geometrical object called a triangle, find the distance, that will give you root n. Where is it required? Suppose you want to construct a hall which is 2 times this hall, we need the value root 2. Suppose you want to construct an area which is 5 times, you need the value of root 5. So once you have root 5, the whole thing is going to be 5 times that. It is in this context they have given this method. This is a simple approach where you see there is a beautiful blend of geometry, arithmetic and algebra. So what you draw is a geometrical figure, what goes in is algebra, and what you get is an arithmetic value. This is a beautiful thing. Next please. So we have a Chandas Shastra, where if you analyze, you will see all the binomial coefficients coming in a very beautiful way. Next. Okay, the other thing which I want to tell is, so let us leave this, and when you come to the domain of how this person has to train himself, of course we have enormous literature, Niti Shastra, Tat Shastra, this Shastra. This verse is something which was quoted by Narendra Modi some time back. I was deeply impressed. Nattvaham kamaye rajyam nasartum napunarvam kamaye dukhataptanam praninam bhakti narasam. What more can be there? Next please. This is again a very important thing. Sushrushasva Guruna, if you look at Kalidasa, he brings in all the essence of Niti Shastra, this Shastra, that Shastra into his literature. This is a very beautiful verse. It has to be taught how to conduct oneself when one enters a new house. Next. So we have most important message, Satyena Amritam, Danena Adanam, Shraddhaya Ashraddham, Akrodhena Krodham. What more is required? So this is in Samaveda, this is called Setu Sama, and it is so beautifully sung. This is what we need today, relevance of this knowledge. Next. And all this, this is a very beautiful confession, so rather a reflection, I would just say, by a person. He says, when I came to India, I thought I should teach these pagans, but I really learned that professionally, spiritually, sentimentally, I cannot do anything. It is only for me to gain. Okay? This is by John McLean. Next. So these are concluding remarks. So the point that I wanted to convey is, so from both human and natural resources, so this is something which we need to train. There is a lot to gain. Next. Last slide. So the history has been wrongly presented to us. I must tell you that this is a series which is an infinite series which is in the form of a verse which is available by 14th, 15th century, and it was made known to the Western world by 18th century, 19th century. But this book which is authored in 210, so he presents as if nothing has been done in India. So there is a lot to learn. Why do we need to study? This is the reason we need to study. Okay, the relevance of it is, this is next. And he says, so there is a lot of discussion which goes on for almost 10 years. The person who discovers this, and then 10 years he has to correspond with them, and the persons, they say it is too ridiculous to reserve refutation. You understand? So the Indians could not have discovered. That is there. Next, last. So it's high time that the full story of mathematics that is developed in Bharat, Vedic times to 600, becomes generally known. Next. That's why he says, Panini, Pingala, Hemachandra, Aryabhata, Bhaskara, their stories are inspired me and they would inspire students across India. Many of those works have been written in Indian languages and beautiful poetry. Please understand the session is the relevance of this material and the language. So you learn mathematics, you learn poetry, you learn everything all in one go. Next, thank you, Namaskar. Now I invite Shri Ramji Raghavan. So he is founder chairman of Agastya International Foundation in India, Bharat. Shri Ramji Raghavan, the social innovator and entrepreneur. He is the founder chairman of Agastya International Foundation. It works on creativity and leadership among underprivileged children. So it's a very interesting foundation. I have heard about it. I have yet to visit it. The government school teachers. Ramji is a member of Central Advisory Board of Education, Government of Bharat, and a member of working group on attracting children to science and math. I request Mr. Ramji to come and deliver.
Everyone, namaskar. When I was a young man, I had a dream of building a school. Thank you. Of building a school, younger person, I guess, of building a school in the foothills of the Himalayas. You know, apple orchards, snow-capped mountains, sacred knowledge, all of that. And it's a dream that all of us probably have. And I said, one day I'll build that school. But I ended up becoming a soulless banker. I lived in New York, London, Puerto Rico for many years. And then in 1998, I was getting very restless and decided I need to go and make that dream happen. When I read a story in the Times of India about a village boy, a cowherd in India, apparently I think in Anantapur, in Andhra Pradesh. I guess it's still Andhra Pradesh. Okay. So when all the cows in this village were dying apparently, they were all dying. Except this one cow, and this boy spotted this cow eating from a pile of garbage. And suddenly he made a connection that maybe it's eating something that's preventing it from dying. So he got hold of the garbage and did an analysis and a project, and he won a National Science Award, competing with the best and brightest kids from across India. And I remember thinking, wow, you know, the School for Creative Kids, if it could produce children of that ilk, that would be something great. So I went back to India, and I had no background in education. So I got a group of people together, and one of them was P.K. Iyengar, the former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. And he said, you know, Ramji, your focus on creativity is really the need of the hour. Bharat was always very creative, but we seem to have lost it in the last few decades or perhaps centuries. And he said one of our failures is, while we built the atom bomb, for instance, he described to me how India built the atom bomb. He said we kept finding that the system wasn't producing enough people with a creative bent of mind. So we had to unmold them and get them to start thinking and acting more creatively. And yes, we succeeded, but it was one hell of an attempt, very difficult. So unless we disseminate this creative temper to the masses of India, whatever it is, I'm afraid India will not transform and realize its true potential. So I asked the question, what makes someone creative or innovative or a great problem solver? And we came up with a very interesting model. It took about a day's worth of brainstorming, and we said creative people tend to be great observers. You know, if you see the story of most of our rishis and all the discoveries and formulas and whatever it is, somehow they're able to observe more than the average person does. Okay, there's a whole literature on that. There's an awareness, deep awareness. There's discovery and experimentation and exploration. They have the ability to connect the dots, like that village kid. Apparently unconnected things, and then apply it to create something of value to society. And all of this, we said, is based on curiosity. You must have the spirit of inquiry, because if you're not curious, you're not going to observe very much. So we said, okay, the mission of the foundation should be to spark curiosity, nurture creativity, and we added instill confidence, because confidence and motivation are terribly important. Another way of saying it is, if you can see this, it's a little top, and it's very interesting. I'm sure Professor Ramsubramanian knows all this, but I'm not a scientist, okay? You put it on a surface, it sits on its bottom, because that's where its weight, center of gravity is. But if you spin it on a surface, it tips over and begins to spin on its stem. Now, I don't know about you, but when I saw that first happen, I went, It just stimulated my curiosity. So we said, the is very important in learning, because that awakens your mind, your senses. And when you see that happen, you wonder, why is that happening? How is it happening? Could it happen differently? And if you do find out, you experience the famous aha effect. So we said and aha are profound ways of learning, in fact of being. And finally we said you must have fun doing what you're doing. On our campus we have a lovely statue of Maharishi Agastya, and he has a lovely belly and he's smiling. And Professor S.K. Ramachandra Rao actually designed it for us years ago. So I asked him, Professor, why does he have a belly? So he didn't get into the details, he just said because he's inwardly happy. Right? Now maybe that makes me feel a little good now with my growing belly. But so you must have fun doing what you're doing, and that's the ha-ha effect. So we said curiosity, creativity, aha, and confidence and fun in learning, ha-ha, is really the mission of this organization. With that in mind, we went and bought 200 acres of barren wasteland in Kuppam, near Bangalore, and over the years, we built it up. I'll show you a short film on what's happening. But today, the foundation has about 1,500 employees. We reach over 1.5 million underprivileged kids across India in 19 states. Thank you. Tens of thousands of teachers. People often ask me, why did you name the foundation Agastya? Honestly, when I was living in London, I have a friend, Gopi Warrior, a very spiritual person, and one day I asked him, I want a name for the foundation. And he said, what name do you want? So I said, a Bharatiya name, that's not too long. So he closed his eyes and said, Agastya. So I said, very good, wasn't he a Maharishi? And he said, don't worry about it, just go with the name. And honestly, I hadn't thought of Maharishi Agastya probably until then, although I'd heard the name. And I went to Bangalore and my father said, very interesting, that's what you want to name the foundation. Actually, there's an Agastya temple which is quite rare, quite close to where we live. And your mother used to go there and pray. And I just thought, maybe it's a coincidence or something. But certainly it went to my heart, I called Gopi. And then one day in London, I was visiting and saw Gopi. And I said, tell me, you have some sort of clairvoyant capacity. Is this foundation going to succeed? Because I was very nervous, uncertain. I'd quit my job to start this in the villages of India. God knows where that would lead to. And he said, look, I can't tell you whether it will succeed or fail. The only thing I can tell you is, first let me ask you, did I impose the name on the foundation? I said, no. He said, you're sure? You came and asked me. I said, yes. He said, okay, remember one thing. Whether the foundation fails or succeeds, remember, you are not the cause. You're only a delivery system. The day you forget that, is the end of it. So try and approach your work. Well, I do have an ego, but he said try and approach your work by keeping your ego in check and never imagine that it was all yours kind of thing, right? So that is what Agastya is. I studied a little bit about the Maharishi and found afterwards that he had come from North to South India. So I wrote an article in a British journal. They'd asked me to write about the foundation, And I said the name Agastya stood for spread of knowledge, at that time sacred knowledge, from the north to the south. And integration, he's supposed to have asked the Vidya mountains to come down. So that's about overcoming barriers. And then a friend of mine who studied the Maharishi's life said he was very close to the tribals and the people who felt left out of the mainstream. So egalitarianism, he created the Siddha School of Medicine, Tamil grammar if I'm not mistaken. All of that requires huge creativity. So creativity. So integration, spread of knowledge, being inclusive, involving people who feel left out of the mainstream, and creativity. That's what Agastya means for me. And of course, hopefully, it's being reflected in the work we do. Yes, we are teaching science, we are teaching the arts to the poorest children and the government school teachers, but we also try and instill a spirit of inquiry not just into the external world, which is very important, but also into your own internal world, to foster the spirit of self-awareness, so that the kind of work you do then reflects a more holistic approach to anything that you do. It's not just about teaching science. Having said that, I will now move over to the short film to show you, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. Need to reduce the lighting.
Sanskrit scholar and director of Instituto Cervantes of Morocco. He spent 17 years in Banaras University, I see, that is Varanasi, teaching Spanish there and obtaining a PhD in Sanskrit. He has written numerous papers on many aspects of Sanskrit language and philosophy. Amongst his many contributions to Bharat and Sanskrit is the Sanskrit Catalan dictionary containing around 60,000 entries, which took him around 12 years to complete. After having worked as director of education program at Casa Asia, Barcelona, he is now setting up an institute in New Delhi.
Om Shri Ganapataye Abhinam Astu. Well, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today at this meeting, and I am really grateful to people like Nachiketa Tiwari, Sushil Pandit, and many others that have given me the opportunity to be here today. Say that I am really very much inspired by this session. It gives me a lot of hopes seeing how many informatic engineers, mathematicians, and many people from the science fields are really taking up the cause of Sanskrit and trying to promote it forward. Proceed. Well, time is little, the subject is very long, and we will try just to give a few messages at least to bring our message across. First of all, a little bit of introduction, as I say, and why a Western European like me should want to learn Sanskrit. I say that the reason, it's almost accidental. I went to India following a woman that now is my wife. And once I was there, I was really amazed. I was really amazed to discover the depth and really the subtlety of Indian culture. So, reading the Bhagavad Gita, I was struck by one of its verses, and then I decided that I should learn Sanskrit, not for any particular purpose, but just for myself. I didn't want really to make a professional career for me. I went to Banaras, and there at BHU, there are few neighbors here from that time, Sunta and Elizabeth and Conrad. We were a bunch of foreigners long time ago there trying to learn Sanskrit. I want to say that it's very difficult for a foreigner who has no knowledge of an Indian language to learn Sanskrit. We must do our homework, we must really start from the beginning, and well, we did work hard. But the first thing I would like to say, is that I was going to BHU during the day, and in the evening I was going with the pandits there, sitting at their feet, and learning with them all the things that I could not understand at the classroom. So I had both things, the university and the pandit. One thing that struck me was the difference between the Western learning methods and the indigenous one. A Western scholar of Indology is a person who knows where things are. You ask him about, Abhinava Gupta's opinion on Sadarnikaran, and he will go to the shelf, take the right book, and browse through it, and tell you what he knows. But the traditional Pandit is completely different, because he memorizes the book, he internalizes the knowledge, and he digests it inside. You said it very beautiful, and I cannot but agree with you. Nowadays, memorization is very much questioned in the West. Just now in Spain, there was a law against memorization in the schools, which I think it makes people a little bit dull. And so I was really surprised to see that how the texts were alive in the form of a traditional Pandit. I want to say one thing from the start. I was attracted to Sanskrit first because one shloka spoke to me and changed my life in a way completely. But once I started learning, I was really surprised by the analytical power of a language like Sanskrit. I became, very interested in Paninian grammar. I did my PhD in Paninian grammar. And it has been said, and the power, the intellectual power of Sanskrit struck me. And I say, look, Here we have a language that is both analytical and spiritual. And that was, you know, it came to me as a surprise. It's not just sometimes what they say, you know, the ethereal things about the spirituality, but the sharp points of a critical mind were there. Just to put an example, you know, Panini has put his grammar about 4,000 rules. He has devised a special language, and a special language that compresses information. If you print Agastya, you will get perhaps 30 printed pages. If you decode from Paninian language into normal language, you will get a book of about 800 pages. This has been done already by Gale in his Higher Grammar, no? So that was a wonderful thing to see, and these abilities, no? And I was really struck. Now, I want to say one thing, in the spirit of this conference, no? I think that Western learning versus indigenous learning should not be opposed to each other, but the combination is good. Don't give up completely, because I saw that on Western Indology. That's one message. This is not all that bad as some people may think now. The Westerners introduced the historical method, and that's also a contribution. When you put them together, you become stronger. Yesterday I made a point, and it was, I think, quite well received, that one of the problems that we have today is the neglect of the traditional Pandit. He's a storehouse of knowledge, but nobody's paying attention to him. So I was very happy this morning, early this morning, when I heard about the Indic Academy and all the work that they are doing to really support the traditional Pandit. It is said that Sarasvati and Lakshmi do not go together, but they could, you know, at least have better relations, you know? Because for the traditional Pandit, I see these humble people living almost on nothing, you know, but they are suffering a lot. We should make a special effort, you know, to bring them, because they really know the Shastras in a deep manner. And one thing I also want to make very clear, for the West, what means Sanskrit? I say here, the Sanskrit revolution, how Sanskrit changed Western human science in the 19th century. You know, to study Sanskrit in the 19th century in Europe was like high-end technology. That's why so many Indological centers were open in the West. No? I like to say that we would not have Western linguistics without Sanskrit. The German scholars, they didn't know the difference between sword and sonant. No? They didn't know about morphemes and lexemes. And that all came through the knowledge of Sanskrit grammar, who changed enormously human sciences during the 19th century. Arthur MacDonald will say that this is like a second renaissance for Europe. Now all this is almost forgotten. And one thing that why I think we should learn Sanskrit and we should keep Sanskrit very much alive, which by the way, and I am sorry to say, is quite dying in India. And many people know that concern, no? The European Renaissance that made Europe one of the strongest cultures, you know, during the last 4 centuries, especially in the 19th centuries. How it began? It began by looking into the classics, by looking into Greek and Latin, by recovering all the information that was in ancient India, in ancient Greece and ancient India. So now, I think, to be able to do a real Hindu resurgence or renaissance, you have again, you cannot forget about Sanskrit. You have to go again back there and try to recover all this information. In fact, it was not only the 19th century. Sanskrit has already struck the West much before that. And it was that during the Middle Ages, when like Sanskrit mathematics was brought to Europe through the Arabs. It was Al-Warizmi who wrote Hisab al-Hind, and that Hisab al-Hind was translated into Latin by the School of Translators of Toledo, which is a city in Spain. And from there, the first zero, it's now that came to Europe, it's in the Escorial Museum in Spain. And from that it spread through all over Europe, changing completely the history of European knowledge. I think that there was even one previous time when Sanskrit struck the West, but which is around the beginning of the Common Era, but that is not so well documented. So we can see that Sanskrit is really important in that sense, and that it already has contributed to universal knowledge. Having said that, I would like to say what Sanskrit can offer in the 11th century. And I say that beyond empty claims, because there is a lot of empty claims made about what Sanskrit can contribute. One of them is, for instance, proceed, that Sanskrit is the most suitable language for computers. This is not true, because computers are machines, and computers understand machine language. In my opinion, but there are many fields that Sanskrit can still be. I have enumerated here logic, aesthetics, philosophy. Even at the risk of consuming my time and being a little bit technical, let me point out one thing that strikes me very much, and that it may answer questions that have been already put in this conference, I feel that the ideas contained in Sanskrit commentaries have not yet been integrated in the mainstream of human science. One is amazed, while reading a book on modern linguistics, to discover that although many of the problems presented were already discussed by Indian grammarians, hardly any reference is being made to them. This is certainly less than an academic method of dealing with those linguistic problems. A similar thing could be said about aesthetics, rhetorics, philosophy in general. The contributions that technical Sanskrit, and by technical Sanskrit I mean Shastra, made to the problems that were also raised in Western humanities are not taken account outside the narrow field of Indology. So we don't know. I mean, it struck me that Indian students knew very well Eliot's theory of objective correlate, but they knew nothing about Russian. And the same happened in the West. And it's not the case, I would say, that simply not wanting to see something, but rather that a lot of effort has to be applied to make that vision possible. We have a problem here, a big problem. On one hand, people having a sound knowledge of Sanskrit, commentaries too often show little interest in the related Western disciplines. On the other hand, people having a good understanding of today's most relevant issues generally have a very fragmented knowledge of the Sanskrit sources. So it's a question of putting really two worlds together. But for that, I insist, we must go back to the commentaries and really dig out of them all those gems that are still lying there. Well, time is over. 3, okay. I would say another example of secularized Sanskrit, but do not desacralize it. Sanskrit is a sacred language, good for singing and meditating, a language, well, you have it there, right? But there is one particular thing I would like to say. If there is an Indian product, or an Indian wisdom, or an Indian idea that has succeeded in the West, is yoga. Yoga has become universal. So I think that we should also, to spread Sanskrit, think how take a little bit of the course of yoga. Sanskrit, the position of Sanskrit now is that it's learned by a small group of people all over the world. Next month I am going to Costa Rica, where there are 50 years of Sanskrit. I taught Sanskrit in Brazil, I taught Sanskrit in so many places where you wouldn't think that Sanskrit does exist. So on one hand, we have small groups of people knowing Sanskrit, and then you have India, which is a source of Sanskrit, where Sanskrit should be really strengthened. And one thing we are trying to do, for instance with this book, is that the practitioners of yoga understand the Sanskrit words that they are using, about 30, 40. So we make a small dictionary of yoga for Spanish-speaking people, for them to understand, what is behind these Sanskrit words. Again, universalized Sanskrit. This has been already said. Sanskrit is, I would say, it's no longer like yoga, also an Indian property. It's become universalist. That is very important. So, people all over the world, as you see, you're going ahead of me. People all over the world, beyond religion, caste and race, beyond ideologies, are learning Sanskrit. But do not forget its Indian origin. Use Sanskrit to build a strong Hindu culture with a soft heart. A Hindu culture that is universal and non-exclusivist, open to diversity, and that uses the most refined and cosmopolitan language that human intelligence has produced. Sanskrit was said by Leonard Bonflin is a monument to human intelligence, and we should see it like that. Another thing, you can use Sanskrit to understand better Indian languages and also better Indo-European languages. To conclude, I will give you one little example because I think my time is over. Take for instance the word peace. The word peace comes actually from a Latin word which means pax, right? And what is the etymological meaning of peace in Latin? It is related also to a Sanskrit root, pash, to bind. You have pasha, you have pashu, the animal that is tied. So what was for the Latins, for Western culture, peace was a binding pact, an agreement between people. And that's our concept of peace. Peace is a pacto, is a fact that we bind together and agree to do some things. Let's go to the concept of peace in India. We have Shanti. It's completely different. Shanti comes from Sham, which means to extinguish. So in India, peace was rather the extinguishing of desire and passion and the overcoming of all the hindrances and ignorance. See how beautiful it is. Western culture sees peace as an agreement, as a collaboration between people. And I like very much what it was said at the beginning of this conference. We use this conference, to make our individual success a collective success. And that we can do through the Western peace that knows how to tie people and help work together in a disciplined manner and achieve a goal. But that is not sufficient. We should also understand peace in the Indian way, as I said, as a Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Swamini Pramananda. Swamini Pramananda, more popularly known as Ramji, is an eminent teacher, a dynamic spiritual leader. In her global peace work, Ramji represented the Hindu leadership in UN Climate Change Conference in Denmark. He has been invited to several inter-civilizational dialogues in Bahrain, Nepal, Cambodia, Japan, USA, and so on. He has authored more than 30 books. Today, her global work continues in what is called Purna Vidya Foundation in Coimbatore, Bharat. So now I invite Swamini Pramananda, who is a disciple of Swami Dayananda.
Sukhadam kevalam yamamritam dvandvatitam gavana sadrisham tattvamasya laksham ekam nityam vimalamachalam sarvadhi sakshibhutam bhavatitam trigunarahitam sadgurum tam namami. Offering my pranams to my Guru and the Guru Rishi Parampara of our nation, I stand here looking into a key topic in our life we call education. We find the world all over. Education has been defined in two ways: religious education, secular education. Religious, secular are the two broad categories. And the subjects that you learn in the school, of course, is secular education. And the one that you study through your scripture, whatever may be one's religion, faith, is religious education. Well, the Vedic model, as we have been seeing since our first session yesterday, we talk about, the Veda talks about Dve Vidye Veditavye Paracha Aparacha Tatra Apara Shiksha Vyakaranam Chando Niruptam Jyotisham Kalpamiti. These are the Vidyas which are called Apara Vidya, or the disciplines of the objective sciences. Then what is Para Vidya? Adha Para Yaya Tadaksharam Adhigamyate Yat Tadadrekshyam Agrahyam Agotram Avaranam Achakshushrodram Tadapani Padam Nityam Vibhum Sarvagatam Susukshmam Tat Bhuta Yonim Paripashyanti Dhiraha Iti. The Para Vidya is that Vidya we call the knowledge of the self. So here we have two knowledges, no more secular and religious, but the knowledge of the world and the knowledge of oneself. No educational system is complete without imparting these two forms of knowledge. Whether it is India or anywhere in the world, if Para Vidya is not integrated into our educational system, if I do not even know who I am, what I am about, then why do we bother knowing about the universe? What is out there in the world that can give me that is not already with me, in me? And so we have here a great tradition, the spiritual tradition of India, a tradition that makes one wake up to one's essential nature. What is Paravidya? Well, self-knowledge. What is self-knowledge? Do I really need to have self-knowledge? I know myself as I know myself. Well, the Veda says, you know yourself only in relative terms. When I ask you, who are you? You show me your identity card. You show me your Aadhaar card, your driver's license. You talk about yourself through your community, through your state, through your language. I'm a Gujarati, I'm a Punjabi. I was born in Jalandhar. You always talk about yourself through your parentage. You keep changing your definitions. And the self is that which is not subject to any changing definition. The essential nature of the self is yat tad aksharam adhigamyate. Aksharam is that which does not change, that which does not decline, that which is not subject to time. Knowing yourself is knowing your essential nature. And what is this essential nature that I need to know about? Well, it is all that you seek in life from the world. You seek in life the changeless from a changing world. You seek in life the changeless from a world that cannot provide you, which is time-bound. In fact, in all your search, you are only seeking the changeless one, the timeless one. Nityam Vibhum Sarvagatam Susukshmam. Thus we have in this spiritual Vedantic knowledge tradition, which declares all that you want in life is really who you truly are. Then why do you ask me, well, why do I then go out there? Well, that's my question to you. Why do you go out there when all that you want in life is in here? with you, in you, as you. Well, that's all we can say is the search is on in the world outside for gaining the changeless, the infinite, the eternal, essential truth of my soul, because I do not know truly, in a sense, who I am. And thus Ramana Maharshi's famous statement, Nan Yar, who am I, is really the crux of the matter, has really been the backbone of our spiritual civilization. And in discovery of this civilization, of this truth, we have a great civilization which is no more can be declared as a secular civilization. It is a sacred civilization. It is a culture which is nothing but a sacred culture. The beginnings of the Upanishads, Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam, all that is here is a manifestation of the infinite, is not an ordinary statement. Somebody called it the prattlings of an infantile mind. It is a statement that takes a deep inner awakening to truly own up. When all that is here is a manifestation of the divine, then is it not true? Then all that the culture offers us is the sacred. Every civilization has a culture. And these cultural components are universal in nature, whether it be food, it be dress, it be language, it be art, fine arts, performing arts, customs, manners. It's more or less secular in rest of the world cultures, world civilizations. But in India, tell me, what is it that is not sacred? Whether you look at the rivers, you look at the trees, what is it that is not looked upon? Whether your own pursuits of dhanam, of materialism, you are only pursuing Mahalakshmi, or Saraswati, or you are into arts and here you are, you invoke Lord Nataraja. No matter whatever be my pursuits, it is all nothing but a sacred culture. That is why somebody said, God is everywhere. He is everywhere, but his hometown is India, Bharat. Bharat, because every Bharatiya has in his grain to look upon Bhagavan, Ishvara, God as a member of his family. We don't have house-warming invitations when we build a new home. We have a Graha Pravesha, is it not? And who enters the home first? Lord Vinayaka enters the home first. He is placed, he is given an altar, and then you go about identifying your rooms. He lives with you, you live with him. There is nothing we do, whether it is our food, whether it is bathing, whether it is studies, whether it is starting a new business, there is nothing in the culture that is not sacred. Tell me, is really culture of India separate from its religion? Is the religion of India separate from its philosophy? What is it that you can say when we stand here, when I stand here with my robes, I am religion, I am culture, I am philosophy. When you sit there with your Indian attire, you are religion, you are culture. Pottu is culture, earrings is culture, it's all ornamentation of Ishvara within. Deho devalaya proktaha. Jivo deva sanatanaha tyajed ajnana nirmalyam saha aham bhavena pujaye. What is here is Devalaya, temple of the divine. Really, the culture of India is a sacred culture, and unless and until we awaken to that fact, I do not know how we can call ourselves awakened Hindus of Bharat. To be an awakened Hindu, him apashabdam dushayati iti Hindu. We look for truth, we stand for truth, we carry the truth in our spine, in our backbone, in our prana. In fact, it is this great vision of the manifestation of the universe as the divine that we even chant every prayer, every mantra. Dhyana shlokas, look at your dhyana shlokas. Move padav yasya nabhi Vyada suranilas chandra surya uchanetre Karnau ashadisho dyauho Mukhamapi dahano yasya vasteyamakti. Every word there, bhu, is the pada of whom. Like this, not only in the Vaishnava tradition, apatala navastalanta bhuvana brahmandama vispurate Jyotis Bhadika Linga Mauli Vilasa Purnendu Vantamritai. Whether it is Shaiva, Vaishnava, Agama, no matter whichever be your tradition or Shakta, sacredness, awakening to the sacred, revering the nature, living with gratitude. Is this not relevant in modern times? Where we are filled with the 3P system, driven by productivity and possessions and popularity, where all we want is to fulfill our greed. Here we are told, learn to live in gratitude. An attitude of gratitude can come only when Isha Vasya Vidam Sarvam. When I can revere nature, when I can say I have enough. Our elders, our ancestors taught us really to say enough. We have enough. I remember as a child, my mother never liked me asking her for anything. If I asked her every once a year, we used to get new clothes only 2 times in a year, Deepavali and Janmadina. And one time I asked her, can we not afford? See, the other neighbors are getting new clothes on New Year Day. Can we not afford? And she always asked me, do you need it? Do you need it? Don't go by greed, looking at what others want. This we were taught. This is a culture that teaches you to live in contentment, in peace, in harmony. We cannot afford to mess around with our world. We cannot really hurt the universe because that's our infrastructure. We need to learn to live in harmony. We need to be able to contribute. My guru always said, be contributors and not consumers of this universe. Well, let me conclude by saying, it was my guru's vision to come up with a proper learning program of culture-based value education, which would reach every Hindu home across the planet, which would serve the need to give us in one place all traditions of our culture for parents, for teachers, for children. And Purna Vidya has been a series of books inspired by my Guru, Swamini Saraswati. It has a 12-year program, 23 books for children, parent, teachers. We also are planning for a Vedic heritage, and I would like the previous one. We are planning for Vedic heritage online study courses to be launched early next year. We have self-awakening courses through Vedanta teachings, and really, I appeal here to one and all. We are here people from 30 countries in this educational conference. My personal appeal to all of you to take this program because it really has the various knowledge traditions given in a plain method of instruction with specific guidelines to parents and teachers. And to begin with, I really request Shri Agarwal, to really begin this process today for us, to see that this program reaches every Hindu family across America, across the globe, and wherever, whoever requires any training, teacher training, school implementations, we are here. We have online teachers, we have a base in Coimbatore and in Uttarkashi. You want trainings, you go to Coimbatore. You want retreats, you go to our Uttarkashi ashram. And I invite Shri Agarwal ji to please come up. And you see, these are the 23 books that are available for all of us, one and all. It will be the Bible of Hindu Dharma. I also request Smita, the Daftardar, to please come. I understand you've been doing wonderful work teaching children our Hindu Dharma. And I would like to present to you also thank you all.
Our next speaker is Srimati Shri Kulkarni, co-founder, Council for Creative Education, Finland. Shri Kulkarni is the research director and co-founder of this organization in Finland. She is an entrepreneur, researcher, and writer in the field of creativity in education and educational psychology. She has written numerous articles. She has more than 12 years of research experience in the field of psychology and education. As an international speaker, she has spoken on creativity in education, creativity in life skill, Indology, Vedic educational systems in Finland. So she was the winner of Gold Women Award 2015 in Science and Innovation category. Srimati Shirin Kulkarni, please.
Thanks a lot for this introduction, and I offer my pranam to everyone. Can we go to the previous slide? And I'm really honored to be here with all these stalwarts in their field. I'm just a beginner in front of them. And I know I have a very learned audience in front of me. So I try to put my ideas about creativity in Hindu perspective and how we can integrate it into the modern education. Next slide, yes. So first I would like to offer my gratitude to Swami Vivekananda because of him we are here today. Because he came here 125 years ago and addressed the American population, and because of him now we all are here. And I worshipped him as my idol since my childhood. So it's really my emotional attachment to this event is that I'm in Chicago, where Swamiji came and addressed the Americans. So next slide, yes. So when we think about Hindu-ness, Mohanji Bhagwat referred to this term. I heard about this term from Rangahariji in one of the Bauddhiks in Vishwa Sangha Shibir in 2010. So when he was defining Hindu-ness as a characteristic of the Hindu Samaj or the Hindu society that we call. So we can say it is the Hindu Janamanas. And what are the characteristics a Hindu Janamanas has is that we all know Sahishnuta, then we are very peace-loving people. We go and adapt easily wherever we go. That's why we are in numbers in all continents. And we have this respectful behavior always towards everybody. Not just the living beings, but also with the things like tables, chairs. We say that we should not disrespect anything that is existing, because we say that Ishwar is everywhere. So we have, these are the characteristics of Hindu-ness. Now I would like to draw your attention to what is related to creativity in this Hinduness characteristics. So these three are the main which I found conducive to creativity. So first is this openness of ideas and thinking. We are very open to think about different ideas. We are very open to approach things with different kinds of perspective. And we have this creation of content because of this openness of idea. That is, for example, we have various darshanas or philosophies that we call. We have different kind of humongous kind of literature that we have, which comes from this openness. Same thing goes with the different kinds of art forms, which also arise from this openness. We have a room for debate in our Hinduness. That is the characteristic that we allow the debate. We don't say that now this is my idea and you have to accept it. We always keep it open. So you may accept it or you may not. But it is that we have this room for debate. We also say that vade vade jayate tatvabodha. So we believe that the knowledge can be created with debate. Then we have this tradition of exploration of knowledge. So that's why we have this term called Vidyarthi, so who seeks for knowledge. And we always say in our being Hindu that we say that we should be always student, we should be always learning from each other and from the sources available. Then we, the previous slide, yes. The flexibility which I mentioned, like accommodativeness and acceptance of everything that is existing, like all the ideas, all the things that are there. And the third important thing is the plural nature. So we had the freedom of experimentation and expression. So we could experiment for our knowledge and then we could express it in the form, whatever form we want to produce it, like in the forms of books, in the forms of sutras, in the forms of arts. So we have that freedom. That's why we see our temples, and there also we see that different forms they have. They are on the temples. If you see, like I visited the Konark Sun Temple, where you can see there are sculptures of real-time things, like regular things. You can see it there, like a person waiting for her, a lady waiting for her husband, or some things like that. So it is not always restricted. So like temple, so you have to show something which is religious. It is not like that. Then now we can go to next slide. Yes. So this, like, from liberty of thinking to intellectual slavery. So what happened? Like we always had this kind of liberty of thinking, where we accepted the ideas from different people in different forms, different things. So as we say that sa vidyaya vimuktaye is the central idea that we had related to education. So why we need to learn? Because we want to get liberated. Now this liberated is not related to death anywhere, but it is related to the liberation from the ajnana and the ahankara. So we have to rise ourselves from these things with the help of education. That was the central idea that we had always. And but what happened because of the colonization, this freedom of expression and this openness of thinking got suppressed. They also defamed our arts. So I have given this example of a Odissi dancer. You can see the picture there. So what they did, that they ridiculed that these temple nritya or temple dances. They said that it is sensuous, it is inappropriate, and they kind of, because of that, the Odissi dancers had to, take a refuge. They had to go somewhere else, leaving their places, and they had to like hide themselves. Then after the independence, they could revive the things again. And thus, because of this defamation and because of this suppression, what happened is that we lost our qualities which were conducive to the creativity. We went to low self-esteem and we kind of lost our identity because our culture was shown that it is not at par with the Western culture. The Western culture is superior, we are inferior, our dance forms are not good, the language, Sanskrit language is not our own, there is this theory of Aryan invasion. So like everything that we had to boast about was taken away from us, and that kind of suppressed our open thinking. Next slide please. So this is not in the chronological order, but this is our effort to bring the things together about what was happening in the education development as such. So if you can see that in Bharat we always had the Gurukul system in ancient era, where and then we in the Europe at that time, I mean when we had Gurukul system there was nothing in Europe. But in the education development when it started there was very less freedom of thinking. So that's why when Galileo was trying to say something, he was confined to his home. He was not allowed to put forward his point. But we had the Gurukul system already. Then we also have the Acharya Guru, that is the next thing which has happened. And in Europe there was this just the early Renaissance. Then we went towards the Vidyapith, like the universities, Takshashila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, we all know about what great universities we had. And then Europe, it was late Renaissance. Like Takshashila we had at 800 BC, and the first university in Europe, in the West, started in 1033. So quite later than us. Then comes the next version, next development, is the colonization happened in Bharat, and they tried to standardize the education because it was useful for them to manage and take care of, to maintain. Same time there was industrial revolution in Europe, and then because of the industrial revolution they got into this standardization of processes. So all this quality control, Six Sigma, this lean methods, this all kind of started there, standardization of process, and then they also tried to standardize the education system. As most of you must have heard to Ken Robinson, who says about this standardization of education. And but at the same time, they also started experimenting in education and putting new theories like Madame Montessori and Pestalozzi and all these Friedrich Frobel. They all were already doing some kind of experiments there. Then the next version happened in Europe, that is the digital revolution. When they started using technology into education, new pedagogies that they developed, like this inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, all these kinds of different methodologies and pedagogies they tried to formulate. But what happened in Bharat is that we kind of lost our purpose of education and we got stuck into assessment. So now also if we see like what is happening, if we want to change something in the education system, first thing which is done is the change of assessment or evaluation. So now what we have to do, if we go and look to the contemporary Europe, like what is happening there now, so that they understood that after this standardization of process and new pedagogies, they understood the importance of identity, self-realization, self-exploration, and passion. So whenever I work in Finland and with many other country teachers, so they say that we are very worried if the child is not passionate enough about something or anything. So they promote this self-identity and passion, encouraging creativity and student participation. It's what's happening in Europe. And in India, in Bharat, we are not still there. So we need a leap from this Edu 4 dot to Edu 6 dot. Because we had this Gurukul system in place. We know what is self-learning, what is self-identity, and the importance of it, seeking knowledge. So we need not go to this digital revolution, new pedagogies, and then to self-identity. We already have it. So we can directly go from 4.0 to 6.0. Next slide, please. So how we can bring back this Hindu perspective in modern education? Whenever there was an effort to bring something related to Hindu Dharma into the education, it was criticized as saffronization. So why it was criticized like that? Because it was always related to the Hindu beliefs and something related to the religion, but it was not related to Hindu-ness. So what I propose is that we have to bring the Hindu-ness back into the education and not only the religion. As I said, we just are focusing on superficial things. We need to go to the core. So what is the core? Is the learning to think and learning to learn, which are our qualities as Hindus. We like to learn, so learning to learn and learning to think is what necessary. And yeah, just you can go to the next slide. Yeah, I'm just ending. So then how we relate these qualities of Hindu-ness to the creativity in modern education? So as I mentioned in the first place, this openness of thinking which we have. So we can give an open curriculum framework, and where we have flexibility, that we give the autonomy to the teachers to experiment more. They can find their own methods, and that is the pluralism. So you will approach the education with different approaches, with different methods and different theories. It should be allowed. Now we kind of always the order comes from the above, that now we will have the constructivism. Nobody knows what does it mean, but they just give an order and then we start working on it. So thank you very much. The next slide. Yes. Thanks a lot for your patient hearing, and please feel free to ask questions after this. And just the previous one. This is in our organization. We do this work about creative education. We also held a conference, so the information is there, and it was very wonderful to be here. Thanks a lot. Pramananda.
Yeah. So we can have only 2-3 questions at most. So that is what has been instructed. So there is a hand there. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm a speaker for topics.
Pardon?
I'm a speaker for topics, and the topic is language. I want to make a small
Yeah. Questions, please.
I wanted to comment on why Sanskrit is so pseudo and regular.
No, I think we should just comment. We should be reserved.
No, because Dr. Pujol left it.
Yeah. So I can also clarify, but I think we should just focus on. I may have to. If it is a comment on that, then I think
It is not a comment. It is not a comment.
No, you want to explain why Sanskrit language is useful for computer, am I right?
No. I take
What is your question, please?
My question is, when you talk about Sanskrit language, okay, the most important indication that has come about Sanskrit language is the fact that when you look at the Nibandos and the Mansamakas and the Vachakshakti, etc., the beauty of the language is that both synonyms and antonyms are permitted at an ontological, epistemological, and a sorterological. That is why Sanskrit is both a spiritual, that needs to be spread, that needs to be taught. You just go and learn Sanskrit if you know language your grandfather spoke.
No, I think if you have questions, please. No, this is an explanation. I completely agree with you. If you have questions, you please ask. Otherwise,
No, my
we should just
question
go
is,
to
I
the
want
next
to talk more about it.
step. Okay, that's fine. There are so many things one can talk about. I agree. Yeah.
Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
I think this question is for Askarji. What do you mean by secularized Sanskrit? What is the scope of secularization? What Puru we did to make that statement? And what is the guarantee that missionaries will not use that as a grafting and appropriating the secularization of Sanskrit? Like Maka Mandir is nothing but Mother Mary's temple. But from outside you can see it's a temple, but one inside it's appropriated. So it's very dangerous.
No, what I mean is that I think we should, don't keep Sanskrit only as Hindu. I think you're going to make a big mistake there if you keep Sanskrit only as a Hindu preserve. But I said at the same time, do not desacralize it. I said yesterday, Sanskrit is the maths of Hinduism. So you do your Sanskrit, you do your maths, you will begin to understand Hinduism. But don't think, that human knowledge only belongs to a certain religion, a certain group of people. That to me, you will be going very close to what we say exclusivism, not to use other words which are not nice, and I don't want to use. Okay? I think that's a mistake. Muslims learn Sanskrit, right? And they get a great regard for Sanskrit. When I said that the decimal system entered Europe through Latin, through the translators of the Spanish School of Translators in Toledo, I would like you to read what Ibn al-Said Andalusi said about Indian knowledge. He was a Muslim, and he wrote in Spain in the 11th century. And what he said about India, about Indian knowledge, will satisfy the most staunch, Vishwa Hindu Parishad follower. So I will say, if you're narrow and you reduce everything, to your Hindu, I say, see my message. Don't get it wrong,
Yeah.
And forget so much about appropriation that sometimes, appropriation is taken everywhere, right? You took things from us, we take things from you in a nice manner. It's been colonization, and that was a problem.
Okay. I think. Thank you. And there is only one question which can be allowed, the last one. Yes, please. And before this question comes up, so there's one more thing. So we all request you, so though we are moving away from this hall a little late, you are expected to come on time. Okay. Next, please. Now, question.
My name is Riembau. I'm doing a PhD in religious studies. And my question is that, okay.
Little louder.
Sorry. My question is that, so a lot of the academic world, they reject the inner experiences of the gurus and the traditions that they have. It's often looked down upon, and also trying to say that you're meditation. So how do you, as a practitioner, trying to show substance what the gurus have to say, what the traditions have to say in this? How do you get this into the Western academic agreement? So it's a since you're a practitioner.
So anybody wants to answer? Okay. So the thing is, there are certain experiences which can never be quantified. So how happy are you when you quantify? So these are things which have to be accepted on their own merit. And today there is a slight change. In fact, so even in terms of mathematics or in terms of certain other subjects, so initially these people felt that there is only one way of doing things. Even with respect to mathematical proofs, they thought that there is only unique way, but today there is a shift. So it is happening, it will happen in the next couple of decades. It is something which I am quite sure. Okay? Thank you all for
Hello.
thank all the speakers.